Balls are not speeding.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the November meeting for Strategy Growth Planning. I'd just like to remind you all that this meeting is being recorded. And Councillor Allison. Right. So, welcome everyone. For the purposes of many of us in the room, and especially welcome to Mr. Rhodes in the public forum, I would like to quickly whip round the room and have staff and us briefly introduce ourselves so everyone knows who's who in the room. So I'm Sharon Wards, councillor for the Northern Ward in Dannevirke and chair of this particular committee.
Morena koutou, ko Dalesmore Takawingoa, I'm a Dalesmore GM Strategy and Community Wellbeing.
Kia ora, Ali Dunn, Manager Democracy Services.
Gary Sutherland, councillor for the Northern Ward. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. Scott Kilmore. I live just out of Woodville and a councillor.
Kia ora, I'm Steve Wallace, councillor for the Northern Ward and deputy chair of infrastructure.
Morning, koutou, my name is Takawingoa and I am the Māori ward for the Whakinui Aroa.
Morena, and apologies for lateness. Alison Franklin, Southern Ward Councillor and Chair of the Community Development and Wellbeing Committee.
I'm Morena Koutou. My name's Tracy Collis. I'm the Mayor of the Tararoa District.
Morning, Peter Johns, Southern Ward Councillor, Woodville.
Good morning, my name is Carsten Vanderroy and I'm the Communications Manager.
Morena koutou, Paulfontein Tax, Takawingoa, East Task Force for Jobs.
Morning, I'm Grace Knott, the Strategy and Corporate Planning Manager.
Welcome, Grace.
Morning, koutou, Angela Rule, Policy and Planning Advisor.
Boy, Tony, you don't miss it.
Morning, everyone. Tony Rhodes, resident with Battle.
Morena, Dan Batley, Planning Consultant, Company Council.
Good morning, Hamish Beckley, team of construction.
Russ Van, GM Corporate and Regulatory Services.
Raj, welcome. Want to introduce yourself? Have you got your puff back?
Mike Long, councillor of 1 year. Am I allowed to make a comment?
Why?
I wanted to make an apology.
Oh.
So last strategy meeting, I was wishy-washy and I was probably not conveyed well enough to the committee there. And so I want to make an apology. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for intros. I always like to make sure that we know everyone in the room today. We have a formal apology from Councillor Irina Weber, but thank you all for being in attendance. So we have a public forum this morning. Happy to move that. Thank you. Right. Moved by Tracy, seconded by Councillor Scott. All those in favour? Tracy. Mr. Rhodes, do you wish to say anything at this stage?
At this stage, thank you.
Welcome. Okay, any items not on the agenda that anyone wishes to? No, we'll move on that one. Any declaration of conflicts of interest in relation to today's business? No, all straightforward on that one. Right, let's reflect on the minutes of the Strategy Growth Planning Committee meeting on the 10th of October. Never been attached. Can I have a mover and a seconder for confirming the true and accurate record? Councillor Peter, Councillor Carey, thank you. Right, let's go page by page then. Page 3. Page 4. Page 5. All signed off, Ellie? Right, I thought we had done that. Meeting. Recommend that they be confirmed. Yeah, that. Oh, sorry. All those in favour? You? Yeah. Let's move on to items 7 from the, we'll start with the management report, 7.1. Adele, do you want to take us through this one, please?
Thank you, Chair Sharon. I'll take the report as read, but I did want to just walk you through a few of the items. Regarding the art strategy, we did have a gathering in-house with council staff, and do acknowledge that the view of the elected members was that not all parties in the district were consulted adequately throughout the development of this. We've also discussed that should council decide that we want to redo this and start again, we will incur some additional costs. So we'll need to revisit that. We are able to look for some external funding to help to bring that a revised strategy to fruition, and we'll need to look at the procurement process so that we do engage someone that's suitably qualified going forward. So would appreciate some feedback from council on next steps regarding that. We've outlined a number of the consultation items, and Councillor Gilmore, did you want me to stop there?
Well, I was just going to inquire, do you want us, as we go through some of these particular items, stop and perhaps have a cordido? So Councillor Scott.
Thanks very much, Chair Sharon, and through you to Adele. Thank you very much for the report and some of the consideration on the art strategy. In reading this, I did have a couple of thoughts of perhaps a way forward. Where I'm thinking with it is I almost think that we scrap the strategy as it is. I don't think it's fit for purpose, and it's quite clear from your report for us to get it to a level that there would be comfort around this table. It would require another consultant to look at it and further expenditure. So if we're going to be using further expenditure on it, because of, I think, where this report, where the strategy is landed, I believe that we'd be best placed to start again. And I actually think that those discussions need to be had through the long-term plan. That would be my view. So I personally see a need for us to have a strategy, but I think we actually need to really understand the costs and the implications on our budget for doing that. So I would be happy to move if that was appropriate once everyone else has discussed it, that we reject the plan, the strategy rather.
That motion.
So we'll have a bit of a discussion, seconded by Peter. I'm just curious to understand how other councillors are placed when it came to reading that. I have some views too, but I'd prefer to. Any other thoughts? Yeah, Tracy.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. I do have, and I guess the person that did complete that strategy probably was suitably qualified. by memory. The other part is that they did actually share with me the full, and I'm not sure if councillors have seen the full consultation and discussions. There is a document there, and before leaving the district, she did forward me that. So I guess before throwing everything out, that may be worth having a look at. And to be fair, I haven't, so I can't. I'm not sure what all of those individual conversations were or whether there's any value in that. But I'm happy to locate that document and send it through to everybody. It would be on file here at council. It was just that she was passionate about that, although I agree with the decision that was made. And not accepting that, because there was a huge rates implication, and I'm not sure that everybody was consulted with. And if we don't have that wider buy-in within the community, then yeah, we're just not giving effect to it.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. Again, I'm happy to move the motion in a moment. Just to quickly speak to that, I think that I haven't seen the background document, and I think that that could be really valuable. I don't necessarily think that that has to change our decision today, because if it's being reworked and redone, that document could become very, very, very valuable in the formation of a new strategy. So I don't discount that at all, but I am happy to move that this committee rejects the art strategy as it's been presented, and further discussions will commence throughout the long-term plan process.
I'd like to move an amendment to that motion, if I may. Rather than reject that document, that it be received and looked at as the basis for further discussion on the policy. Strategy, sorry.
Yeah, through you, Chair Sharon. Yeah, knowledge is wealth. So we're going to join the dots, and obviously 80,000, was it? That was, pardon? 25,000 was spent on this report, strategy report. So, and Mayor Tracy has just alluded to very interesting points in it. So we need the information to make an informed decision, and I agree with comments in the room. But yeah, knowledge is wealth. So if we don't get all the knowledge, how can we make an informed decision on the strategy going forward?
As noted, Councillor Steve. Councillor Ellison.
Yes, I agree with Councillor Wallace. I think that the fact is that if there's some information, we need to see actually what background work was done on the strategy through the process. That way we can glean where the gaps were, perhaps the places that were missed or were not delved into deeply enough. And let's face it, at least we'll get some value back for what was spent. And I know, yes, it was funded, and we appreciate that, but we do like to know that it goes where it needs to go. So I think it's a great idea to have a look at that.
Councillor Keary and then Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. Just a question. That report was forwarded to Creative New Zealand to show that we're the benefit of their 20,000 grant or something, wasn't it? So they've got that. Are they expecting further from us in respect to that, or is our accountability to them past? Do they want to see?
To that basket. We've met the contractual obligations.
They'll just have interest to see where it goes, perhaps, will they? Okay, thanks.
Councillor Moore.
For you, Chair Sharon, I wouldn't like to throw the whole thing away. I'd like to take the good from that report and discard some of the other things, and also read the report that the Mayor has just mentioned so that we know who was consulted with, and then consult with people that weren't spoken or consulted with. I'd hate to see the whole thing thrown out. There's a lot of time and money that's gone into it, so let's use what is salvageable from it. Thank you.
The only comment, go back to the amended motion from councillor Peter, is that I'd certainly be very keen to see it funded externally. Any more work that is done that we were able to. Yeah, there is. The first motion was seconded.
Just a scrap, and then councillor Gilmore, and then that wasn't taken. And then
Peter's amended it, but we haven't got a seconder.
if we took the original mover and seconder, councillor Peter Johnson, not move an amendment.
Move an amendment. Okay, so let's
Start from start again then.
Right, so the first motion from councillor Scott was to reject the document that we've received. And that was seconded by councillor Peter. The subsequent discussion has hinted at if that motion was to be amended to receive the strategy that we have, to consider the additional information that Mayor Tracy has indicated, and do some further work through the LTP. I'd like to suggest that we seek additional funding in that as well.
Original mover and seconder, could we move?
Thanks, Chair Sharon. I'm happy to withdraw my motion, and then Peter, councillor Johns is able to put his motion. So I'm happy to withdraw my original motion.
Seconder agrees to that.
I agree with that, but so doing, can I suggest that councillor Gilmore put a further motion with the term received rather than rejected?
Thanks, Chair Sharon. I would like to move that we receive the report, also receive the report and consider the further background information to the report, and further consider the strategy through the long-term plan process.
Are we receiving the vote? All those in favour? Handsome. We all good now, Ellie? Thank you for that. I was going to come back to that, but yeah. Right, so the motion has been passed. Do we still want to have a discussion about how this might work and any other issues? Mayor Tracy.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. Just to confirm, I have located that email and sent the file.
So are we able to direct officers and staff to ensure that that is included within the LTP program as we move through it? Future will be commenced here the rest of the next year. Yeah, we've got a bit on our plate, haven't we? So everyone comfortable with that?
Yep.
Right. Thank you very much for that discussion. No, Adele, you wish to add to? We'll move on.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. I just wanted to make one final comment just for the record. Certainly my introduction where I described needing to have a suitably qualified person to undertake the work was not to imply that the previous person was not suitably qualified. So moving on through the report, we've got a number of consultation items that are going to cycle through in 2024. And I do have Carsten in the room in case the elected have any further questions on that. It does create quite a broad depth of work that we need to get through. We're highlighting the bylaws, the number of bylaws. We're actually within the 2-year grace period for needing to have those reviewed. We've also identified, although they've not been finalised, alluding to some of the public consultation areas that we may look to push through in 2024, although those will be finalised. The team have described some of the informed topics that we suspect may be cycled through the community, and also allude to the fact that there will likely be some engagement of some shape or form regarding the impounded supply.
Right, so this is a fairly significant chunk of work, so I think it's worth having round the table discussion on this one. Thank you, Adele. Councillor Peter.
Thanks. Adele, those bylaws, there is one that we did discuss, or I brought up at a prior meeting, that seems to have got lost in the system. And it's to do with the properties not being up to an acceptable standard, and junk and cars on sections and things like that. I forget what it was called, but it seems to have got lost in the system.
Micah.
Is that the dangerous and unsanitary buildings?
Would be.
That they will fit into the same review program as the bylaws, just not in the first tranche. So we'll see that come through next year being reviewed. That's the
That is a bylaw though, isn't it? It's not.
Yeah. I wish to make one. I'm very concerned about the number here. Very concerned, and I appreciate that some of these have been sitting and waiting, but I'm concerned on behalf of A, the officers of staff, and B, us as a team that have got all of these coming down the pipeline, and we haven't had them in front of us for quite a while. We either, I believe, we're going to have to get very smart at a program of work for this through this committee, and whether or not we even have to rethink how that happens. Councillor Steve.
Just from my own mind, what is the cyclic life of a bylaw?
bylaw, it has a life of 5 years. When you review it, it has a life of 10 years.
Thank you.
So, in your view, now, what is the strategy other than tranches? The other concern I have is that some of these may well impact on some decisions that we're going to need to make during the long-term plan. And has that been taken into consideration about what should be first ranks to make sure we're not going to be stymied? Angela?
Perhaps it might be a good idea for us to produce a one-page project plan for the committee so that you can see how the project's being set up and the risk assessments and whatnot, because it is a big workload for sure. So yeah, we have a project team, and right from the project office is managing it, along with Jim's knowledge of most of the bylaws, and the Rivestone Law are doing the writing and reviewing. So it's not relying on in-house capacity to get through the production of them. And then they obviously have the specialist knowledge. So would it be helpful if I could give you a one-pager on the project plan, basically?
It's probably an operation call, I think.
Yeah, Angela's correct. We do, so the management of the bylaws, that is being undertaken by the PMO office, and Mike is well across that, and they've been staged throughout first half of next year, second half of that year, and then the first half of 2025. We're quite confident that we can meet the timeframes for the bylaws. The what is making it look like a large amount of workload, and it is that we've also got LTP consultation in here as well described. That's been managed by our LTP team, but we just need to be mindful of the fact that all of the consultation is filtering through our communications department. So we are looking to backfill that team. with the vacancy that we do have, as we've shifted one of the officers into the recovery team, that's not an additional resource. It's using the resource that is surplus while we're using someone in recovery to help to give a bit more fat to that team so that we can get through this period. But it is about us bringing both of those consultation streams together through this committee so that you can see them in isolation, but then how they're going to operate together. Because also we need to be mindful of oversaturation of the community and how are we communicating the relevant topics at the right times. Carsten's well across that and might like to shed some light on that today.
I think most of the things that are my concerns have been voiced by either Angela or by Councillor Wards. I am very concerned. I've just become a communications manager about what's going to happen next year. The sheer amount of work which is in front of us. So there's the LTP. We don't know what's going to happen with the compounded supply. There's all the bylaws, and there's also the district plan, which we have to consult on. And in addition to that, there's also a waste minimisation strategy, which we need to consult on. I am very concerned, and I would like to get the process of backfilling Anna's position underway as soon as possible. Yeah, because the reality is that I'm supposed to be managing, but I'm also doing a hell of a lot at the moment. So it's doing two jobs.
Adele, what are the consequences of us not having reviewed these within the time frame? I'm reflecting on that big long list, the existing bylaws for review for a start.
That's probably a Raj question, but we are within the 2-year grace period. So if we do have stuff that we need to shift, we can shift some of the bylaws so that we can get through the LTP consultation period effectively. But we do need to remain within that 2 years.
Councillor Steen? Or is Raj gonna keep these get into position? You want to hear him first? No, maybe your question.
Yeah, the only question he would probably answer this is why is it 100% more, right, for an amended bylaw where we set up a bylaw, you just stated it was 5 years. And then if you amend it or whatever we're doing to it, it's 10 years. That's 100% more. That's a lot of life can go past in 10 years. What's the rationale on that, please?
So we just bow down and take a picture. That's it.
We got Malcolm waving his arms in the background.
Just to clarify that, you can do a new bylaw anytime you like. The 10 years, once you're in your second stage of it, once you've reviewed it, is the maximum life before you need to review it again. And there is a 2-year grace period so that your bylaw still continues to operate 2 years past the cut-off time, if you like. Once you go past that, then it depends on the bylaw. Some of them it's pretty major in terms of an impact. So like the dog bylaw or stuff like that, you could end up not being able to issue fines and stuff like that. And some of the other minor bylaws, it's probably not that big a deal in a period of time. But it does mean, obviously, assuming that you had a good reason to have the bylaw in the first place, it's quite important that you still have it so that it's legally available to you to actually use the enforcement tools.
Thanks, Malcolm. Councillor Scott, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Sharon. The conversation and discussion that we've had has raised some concerns and some alarm bells for me. Definitely with the work program of getting through those bylaws, but actually also in our consultation that we're going to have to be undertaking for the LTP. The Auditor General, and we learnt this at Rural and Provincial, the Auditor General is going to be particularly focused in this LTP cycle on our consultation document and ensuring that consultation is meaningful and adequate, and we are actively well, we know that we are accurately getting the views of our community, and consultation overload. We all know what impact that can have when we are consulting on waste minimalisation, on our bylaws, and also through our LTP. So I would like to respectfully request that we have an officer report provided to this committee on our consultation and our sequencing, making sure that everything that we're having to go out to the community, that we have a clear plan to ensure that we don't have consultation overload, to ensure that we have confidence that we're going to meet our obligations, but that our consultation is meaningful. I do hear the staff concerns about this as well as our concerns. So I think that would be very prudent for us. So whether I have to move a motion to do that, or if we can have an indication that report.
We'll come back and I'll seek Adele's input on that one.
Here, Councillor Kerry and then Councillor Peter.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. Just a couple of things. Angela mentioned that the review's a 10-year cycle. Was that the figure? 10 years. So all the last, just maybe I'm missing something. All the ones under 4.2 are 2018 and 19. So am I looking missing something if I add 10 onto that? Missing something, I'm sure. Yeah.
It's because the ones with 2018 were new bylaws, so they have a 5-year period and then a 2-year grace period and then a 10 years beyond that.
Remember those ones? I can't remember discussing the animals, cats, poultry and bees. I dashed if I can. They slipped in when I was asleep. Okay, so that's you want it there. Well, if that's the case, there is a heap of work there, and one of the concerns I have, being respecting the profession, is that if we just dump all this stuff too on the table and say let the lawyers have a look at it, my goodness me, you're gonna have to be careful about our budget there. Some of these reviews may be just a tick; they're all okay right now. We could shift them quickly. That might just need a bit of a look from us and or the staff, perhaps. We just need to be careful about the process here, don't we? Really, I think we need to be really careful how we do it in our time frame and our stress on the staff, and maybe just be careful if we start engaging lawyers at the first stuff, because I hate to think what we paid for the water bylaw, and that's poked its nose up here again. I wouldn't like to look back on the budget for that over the last few years. But sometimes, with due respect to these, you get a bylaw in front of the lawyers, and it's months of work and 20 grand each one, and to change the word B to B's. Yeah, that's cool.
Thanks, Sharon. Kerry's sort of covered a couple of the comments I was going to make, and e.g. that it may be that some of these, or some or all of them, may just be a tick process. We don't need to spend a lot of time on them. But the other question, well, the question I have is, do we need to consult with regard to a review? Do we?
So Ellie's just reflected that there is actually a legal process we have to follow with this review with bylaws. So it's not in the box by a committee might not cut the mustard. No. Councillor Ellison. Thank you, Chair Sharon. Actually, something that really jumped glaringly out at me, and I don't know, the alcohol bylaw. And looking at, I was here on council when we actually created that bylaw, and the major decision that we made was not to have an alcohol policy, which councils are entitled to have that relates to their own area. But when you look at the legislation around consumption and use and sale of alcohol, you can't go outside those guidelines anyway. So there could be other ones in here where it is legislated and that our bylaw basically is around that. Okay, so it's probably the only two decisions we made that we could make independently of that, that government policy is liquor ban areas, for example. And where we came unstuck with that was actually the areas, some of the areas that we wanted to do as liquor bans had actually already been stipulated in a prior document that they could, if they were existing businesses at the time, then they could continue to have tables out on the footpath and have a glass of wine with a meal. So there was very, very little that could be changed from the actual law itself that relates, unless you have your own alcohol policy. And we decided that was really not worth spending the time and the money on.
Raj, I know you've taken the hot seat for a reason.
Through you, Chair, great discussions. I think some of the questions that you asked was answered, but I'll just very quickly cover the questions and the key points here. One is if the bylaws expired, and Malcolm covered is us giving effect to it, or enforcing it would be an issue. So we need to have making sure the bylaw is current or in operation. If not, the staff will have difficulties in enforcing the bylaws or giving effect to it. So it's quite important that we do so. When we did the bylaws and when we grouped them up, there was a logical grouping done by the staff in terms of how they grouped the bylaws into the 3 or 4 bylaws, grouping it together. So there was a logical grouping as how we did it. It was based on prioritization, based on what are the bylaws that requires a significant change so that the staff could give effect and implement those bylaws, or they have some issues where they need to have those bylaws adopted first. So there was a little bit of prioritization done. So that's how there's some method behind how we group the bylaws and also spread it out, because we do understand, Carson is absolutely right, the level of work that's going to be required, not just from the comms team, but the community receiving consultation from community. We're trying to manage that. So that logical grouping was decided as the best approach to do so. Dan just highlighted to me to say that actually there are a few other consultation which we'll be doing regards to the district plan, the urban design, and the growth strategy. So that's coming up as well. So yes, I hear the councillor's concern about, want of a better word, consultation fatigue from council and also the community. So we got to manage that. So I think it's a good idea that we bring, and I think for us will be quite good too, and I think for Carson as well, to have what you call a consultation overview for the next 12 to 18 months. You know, what are we doing? So Carson or the comms team and Adele especially could know what's going on and whether can we manage that? What do we need to put in place? Like what I say, you know, some of it we have to consult. It's not like we choose not to. Like for example, the bylaw on LTP. Some of the consultation too might be a lot easier, like bylaws. Some of the bylaws would be just minor change. So, and they're targeted. It's quite different when you talk about the district plan or talk about LTP. The consultation it's got a different breadth to it. So we've got to manage that as well, and how we do that. And I think the effort required for us to consult, I think I take on board the discussion here, and also Carson and Adele's point is effort required for us to prepare ourselves and meaningfully consult. I think it's really important. We just can't do the tick box exercise. I think that's not going to work for us. So that means effort going to be required for us on our part. So I do not want to underestimate the efforts going to be required for us to prepare ourselves well enough so that we can effectively and meaningfully consult and engage with the community. So all that in place is, do we have a choice to not consult on some of it? I think if we can pull together a work plan, putting everything in and management apply the lens over it, I think we have, and I think those that we're putting in place in Adele's report are things that we have to consult. We have no choice in how we're consulting it. We are constrained by timeframes. Bylaws have a time frame. The district plan has a time frame. The growth strategy, urban design, LTP has a time frame. So that's a challenge in front of us. So I guess we have to do it. But I guess it's how we deliver on it, how we deliver effectively.
Peter, and then I'll go to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. I just want to get back to that unsanitary buildings. You say it's a policy, not a. My understanding was we discussed it with the idea of it being a bylaw in order that we had some teeth to do something about properties where there were junkyards and so on. What's the point of a policy without teeth? And why hasn't it become a bylaw? This is years old.
And 6.1. It is there, it's just not in the first.
But I mean, how long ago was it that we? 3 or 4 years ago? No. No, sorry.
Racking my brain trying to think this. Some of the policies are because there's specific legislation that things like, the Dog Act, and I can't remember that sanitary buildings one as part of the Building Act.
It's section 131 of the Building Act.
Yeah, and so there's some powers under the Building Act which says that you have a policy, not a bylaw. So it just depends on, the legislation is not consistent in terms of whether the response is a bylaw or a policy. And in some cases, you've got a choice of either, but they have different powers and different processes. But that one in particular is in the Building Act. So if you did I don't think there's any ability to do a bylaw as such. You do a policy. And then your powers are strictly limited by whatever it says that policy can do in the Building Act.
We can go back to that though.
Do that and
Thanks, Malcolm. But the main thing we were looking at was, for instance, a section with 10 wrecked cars sitting on it. Nothing to do with the building as such. So I don't imagine it's part of the Building Act or anything like that. It was to tidy up sections and properties to make them acceptable within the community.
And that's, sorry, that might be the Resource Management Act, district plan type stuff, but I know councils around the country have struggled with this stuff because there's very limited powers you have under the Acts in terms of interpreting whose view is it that it's unsightly. And councils are very limited to, no, I understand, because I remember going back a long time, councils having these discussions. I remember having a fight about it in Silver District when I put a junkyard. But and it was like the only way they could nail them in the end was under the Health Act as a unhealthy. So this is beyond my skill set there in terms of the current knowledge.
No. Well, thanks, Malcolm. I know at the time we discussed whether the teeth that it provided was sufficient to do anything, but it was decided, I believe, that by having that bylaw there, we could go to somebody and say, do you realise under the bylaw, and it may work. They may tidy up a section, for example. If they chose not to, we were probably stymied. But we felt at the time that it was worthwhile having, at least, it might be a bit of a gummy jaw, but at least we had 1 or 2 teeth. But nothing was done, obviously, but it's coming up.
policy review, Tracy, and then I really would like to try and.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. Just to reflect on Councillor John's queries around that, it was a passion of Mayor Rowley Ellis's and a frustration of not being able to deal with cars and other rubbish that was on properties. So on reflection, actually, I'm sure that was a bylaw, but the first one that was tested on was challenged. So So it may very well be, so I might stand corrected on that. It may actually be a bylaw that's there. So if we go back and have a look in 2016, that was one of the last things that we tried to get actioned. My comment in regards to the number of reviews we've got is in the notes from Rural and Provincial that I sent out this morning. Bruce Robertson did speak around the consultation document, the importance of it, and his strong recommendation was to actually get some expert comms onto those so that you can make sure that everything was covered. And just listening to that pressure that's on the team, that may be something this council may have to relook at budgets and seriously consider to assist in that manner. And they did talk about the consultation fatigue, but actually, you know, some of this is really critical stuff. So I just thought I'd share that.
Tracy, just in the to enable Adele to get through a report, I'm just going to summarise briefly some of what I think the discussion has been about. I think by and large we're all very concerned about the work, about the program of work that has to be done, following due process, as Ellie is indicating. There's been a request from the officers to report on the sequencing of consultation that's going to be required, and that may well bring in some of the thoughts that you had, Raj and Mayor Tracy, around what are our options to be able to get through this in a worthwhile way that certainly reflects what obviously Scott and Tracy have picked up recently at local government. We're obviously not alone in this. I speak for myself, but I'm overseeing page after page, even if it's a one pager of what needs to be done. I'd like to see something done to help us get through this. So what's the saying? You eat an elephant one bite at a time. Yeah. So look, I appreciate everyone's input into that. There's obviously some work that Adele and her team have got to do, but we need to make sure we are focused and prioritise what really does need to get done. If we've got a bit of a grace period and it's worth the risk of not being able to enforce something, well, I think as a council we need to discuss those possibilities and assess the risk. Final comment, Raj, and then I'm going to get Adele to move on.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Just want to make sure that we wrapped up the question Councillor Peter raised about derelict vehicles or buildings. Amy has come back. District plan has got an element, but it's quite subjective, and you would need a bylaw to actually specifically enforce if that's what we're looking to do. But that will be a new bylaw, not existing bylaw.
Under the Act, there are only 3 purposes you can make a bylaw for, and that one of them is protecting the public from nuisance, protecting and maintaining public health and safety, and minimising the potential for offensive behaviour in public places. If we're talking about private property, that's where a lot of these the process falls down, because you have to be able to demonstrate all the legal bits to get through to make that bylaw.
Thanks, Ellie, for reinforcing the why behind some of this stuff.
Derelict vehicles is the name of the policy, and it did meet some of those just in regards to fire danger and other bits. So you could have a look at that, Councillor Johns.
Want to keep going? Adele, please.
So moving forward, the last item on that management report, the second to last item, is Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. Now, typically this item would not be reported through this committee. It was my decision, prepared to be happy to be challenged, but I just thought there were some key aspects that that program's doing that are strategic, looking at workforce and workforce growth and how we might get across sector workings going on for the increased workforce growth that I thought might be helpful to highlight through this committee.
Mayor's Task Force for Jobs is my second champion from Yeah, and I guess I would have appreciated a conversation of just how that might work, because I do see it crossing over both committees. So I'm keen to have a further conversation around that.
Appreciate that, Mayor Tracy. Apologies for that. This agenda had to be pushed up quite early because of leave, but we can pull it through the next committee going forward. We've also touched on the links with the Puhoro STEM Academy in that report too, which is quite exciting to get some of those aspects here for our young people. We've also highlighting a policy update. We acknowledge that policies are yet to cycle through this committee, but do want to draw your attention to the fact there are a number of committees that will have more policies than strategy, growth and planning. We are doing a lot of work in the background to try and get those to a state where they can start to cycle through for review.
Thanks, Dale, for highlighting that it's not just this committee that is heavily involved in ensuring that those policies are in place to be able to act as a framework to monitor against. Any comment on those last two items in Adele's report? Any additional, Adele, you wish to add?
I just wanted to draw your attention to point 6.5, the asset disposal policy that's currently in development. That's going to be quite pertinent for the ongoing discussions around rationalisation of buildings and land. So it's important that we do focus on that to bring it through so that we can move ahead with the next iteration of LTP.
And then that just confirms the comment that I made, that we have to be careful that we choose which ones need to be there for us to be able to move forward into the LTP. Last comment, Mayor.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. Just on that asset disposal policy, that one was incredibly important to me around the transparency for ratepayers of how those assets were disposed of. If there is other goods that are disposed of the council, that each town and communities have the opportunity to know what's there. So there will be some community benefit from that, but understand the pressure the team's under.
Right. So let's go back to the recommendation, which was that we received the report, management report. Can I have a movement, please?
Moved.
Councillor Steve, seconded Mayor Tracy. All those in favour? Thank you, Adele, for your input on that one. Can we do district strategy and then we'll have a quick break? Does that make sense, Dan? Oh, right. So item 7.2, councillors. I'd just like to open this discussion by reflecting that a dream written down with a date becomes a goal broken down into steps becomes a plan backed by action becomes reality. So I'm going to have a slight wahoo about this particular item, and then I'll go back to So councillors, we have in front of us the agenda item that reflects on the final version of our district strategy, Thriving Together 2050. So I'm opening it up for any discussion. We had a fairly comprehensive one last time we looked at this, and that's been reflected in what you proposed here, Adele. Anything in particular you wish to point to before we?
Chair Sharon. We did look to incorporate all of the feedback from the last meeting. I hope you'll see it reflected there. I think probably the focus for me would be 4.2, that we did have a number of discussions around the strategy, some of aspects of the strategy being outside of the direct control and influence of the council, but did want to acknowledge those changes have not been incorporated. We're citing the advocacy role that we will have ongoingly, but then also that the strategy will remain a living document. So as we pivot, we can update it accordingly. I did just want to flag that the version that you've got there has been one slight iteration, and that is just merely some typos that we did pick up after we'd pushed the agenda up. And also a photo on the credits page dropped off. That's been added. Those are the only changes. I didn't want to push it out to everyone again and send everyone in a bit of a flurry with.
We'll make sure that we all get a. Thank you. Councillor Peter.
Sharon, I have one little pedantic alteration that needs to be made. It's on the Our Foundation Strategic Context, page 27, if you've got a written one. Down the right-hand side there says responsibility of our council to support iwi aspirations and hopes for the future. Hopes is a duplication of aspirations, so drop one of them.
So with that in mind, because I think we've all had a good chance to be able to provide feedback. It is a living document, but it doesn't mean every month we get a chance to have a go at it, as it were. Can I respectfully request we get a hands-on copy for everyone? And I know Councillor Long will be putting it in his top drawer and be bringing it out of every meeting. That this district strategy has been a long time coming, and it is a fairly significant day as far as I'm concerned when it comes to adopting a strategy that we all become the kaitiaki of. And I think I'll be encouraging myself and everyone else that as we work through the LTP and make decisions that we point to which part of the strategy that's helping us fulfill. Any further comments before I put the motion around the recommendation? Right, you're right.
Yeah.
Like you, Councillor Watts, it's been an incredible journey to go on. It's taken some time, but it's something that I'm incredibly proud of, that for the first time we have this strategy that we can look everything into. So congratulations to everyone for the input and for the community, and just loving the look that is within that now. So well done. And I'm very happy to move the recommendation or second it to you.
Yeah, thank you, all of you actually, for those comments. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this actually. I just wanted to highlight that going forward, we are in the throes of working on a framework that's going to help us give effect to the strategic objectives within this. And with the help of our new strategy and corporate manager, Grace Knock, she's going to lead that work for us. We do anticipate that that framework will will cause a realignment of the management reporting, because we do want to have all service areas demonstrating to council how we are implementing the strategy through the various aspects of work we do. So it's exciting, bit of work to do, but we're on the right track.
As a final comment, before we adopt the recommendation, I do want to thank everyone that's contributed towards this. We all kind of looked at each other over post-it notes and wandered along the journey together, wondering where we were going. Some stage, there's been a lot of input from a lot of people. Adele, who sits beside me here, hit the ground running when she first came on as GM, and it's no mean feat that you've managed to catch up and pass us on that journey to be there at the finish line with us, Adele. So special acknowledgement to you, all the contributors that have come along, including the staff and those that are no longer part of the council. And I reflect on some iterations that have come along the way. So I only endorse the congratulations to us all and to the team, and thank you everyone for your input. So Mayor Tracy has moved that we receive the report and that we adopt. Can I do both of them together, Ellie? that we formally adopt the Taurua District Council District Strategy Thriving Together 2050. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Peter. All those in favour? Well done, team. And on that note, I think it would be a perfect time to have a quick break, stretch the legs, and when we come back, we'll be inviting Dan and Amy up to the table to go through the growth strategy item. You're good with that, Dan? Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Where is everyone? Having coffee lessons with Steve.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. All good to go? It's Kieran. Okay. Welcome back, everyone. I'm just making a slight adjustment to our agenda, and I've asked Amy and Dan to talk us through item 7.4. It's an update on strategy. Nice to see you, Dan, in person.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. Yeah, thought it'd be nice to pop over for once rather than Marae visits and Zoom calls. But yeah, I guess unfortunately, in some respects, there's not a huge amount to update from our last catch up in terms of progress. And that's for one main reason, and that's our flooding information and the work that's occurring in that space. And it's a bit frustrating, if I'm honest, because it's kind of out of our control and Shannon's control, because we're trying to push as fast as we can to bring a document to you. But unfortunately, there's been a bit of a hiccup with our, and I'll be open and honest, there's been a hiccup with our flood modelling for Pahiatua. So council's engaged a consultant, DHI, who's done a lot of work for council to do some work in that space. They've produced an output that's gone to Horizons for calibration, and it's raised a few inconsistencies between the two parties around flood modelling. Now, that is something that needs to be resolved, but my advice to council and to Shannon is that I think we need to just carry on with the growth strategy. And the reason for that is I think we know enough about the flood risk across these townships to make informed decisions for the growth strategy level, acknowledging that the district plan is the more detailed process that we'll have to go through and refine this work further. So the growth strategy is very much setting that high level direction of what we want to achieve in terms of our growth, and where we potentially want that to go. And if we actually look at Pahiatua, it's quite constrained in all sorts of different directions for different reasons. I think the block that we've identified in the past with council is as good as any down there for a lot of different planning reasons. And certainly if the flooding information comes back and changes that, then we can adapt that through the district plan as we need to. So that's sort of what the holdup has been at the moment. We are expecting a little bit further information by the end of next week from DHI that we will make that informed decision off the basis of. But we are sort of in the throes of setting up meetings to bring the final draft growth strategy through for comment and approval to go out to public consultation. The theme of the meeting, hopefully mid-December. So be good to get that draft signed off this year, and then that opens us up to go out for consultation early next year. So, but obviously things to work through with Carsten and his team around what that looks like as well, because there's obviously a pretty full calendar from what we can talk about this morning. So in terms of Woodville, from a flooding perspective, the hold up there, and I know Councillor Peter Ware to chat earlier that you might have another contact for some data, but the hold up or the tricky part for flood modelling in Woodville has been there's just no data. Nobody collects rainfall information. There is a site up in the hills where the new road's going through that there is some data there, but then as you can imagine, there's probably a difference in data between the top of the saddle versus the flats of Woodville as well. So as with anything, we're only as good as the information in front of us, and you know, it's flooding as much as any planning issue. You could spend forever and a day going down the rabbit hole trying to get to a perfect point. But I think, you know, it's about making informed decisions with what's in front of us. And I think we're moving to a point of having enough information to make some decisions at the strategy level, and then with a mind to refining that as we go into the district plan and the meat of that next year. So that's the flooding stuff. So happy to take any questions on that first, and then I'll move on to some other stuff.
Councillor Peter.
You, Chair Sharon. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Just on that rainfall, Andrew Bolton and his father kept official rainfall records, and I would be surprised if young Andrew has not continued with that. But quite apart from that, those records go back probably 70 or 80 years, daily records. That would be as close as you'd get to Woodville. I mean, it's basically in Woodville. But if you like, I'll talk to Andrew and see what he's got.
We have got rainfall data. So there is reliable rainfall data through NIWA as well. And I spoke to Dr. Alec Mackay, I think, from Landcare Research, who Tony Rhodes had suggested speaking to. And so we've got that information. What we don't actually have is flood imagery, which is that's the limiting factors. There's actually, which is quite ironic, you think in 2004 when we had our big flood, that there wasn't some sort of imagery taken of the Woodville district, but there isn't. So there's other gaps, but Pete Wimsett's also aware of that. He's working with Jeff Watson as well, who's at Horizons. And I think the best we can do is a review through WSP potentially, but timeframes haven't been cemented either.
As far as the 2004 floods are concerned, I was very heavily involved in various aspects on that day. I can show you where the floodwaters came to around Woodville, and or seek information from others of long standing in the town that were there at the time as to where the floodwaters came to. That's certainly the biggest. That in 56 were the big ones, 53 rather.
Yeah, it's a multidisciplinary approach, right? Flooding and isolation is not the issue in itself. It's how we manage that. There's obviously engineering solutions around overland flow paths and that sort of thing. So we're just trying to get ourselves to a position where we, as I say, can make decisions with our eyes wide open that can then inform future decisions through the district plan. And off the back of this work will be a more in-depth piece of work on stormwater management across the district. If I'm honest, that's probably one of the biggest issues when it comes to new development anywhere in the country, because of just the change in groundwater conditions and that sort of thing, and the increased level of development on the ground. And obviously the rain wants to come out of the sky, and it's got to go somewhere. And when we start filling it with roofs and driveways and roads and footpaths and all these sorts of things, it really constrains what Mother Nature wants to do. So you know, there's going to be quite an in-depth sort of piece of work around how we can wrap a framework around future development in these areas to, one, enable those overland flow paths to still do what they want to do. And I think I showed an image to Councillor Scott and Councillor Peter in a meeting a few months ago that, as you can expect, the water wants to get from the hills to the river, and there's a whole lot of fingers in between of waterways. And as soon as we start putting things in the way, we're essentially creating dams. But at the same time, we've got to balance that out with, we want to grow, we want to facilitate development and that sort of thing. So it's a bit of a juggling act, but it's also having that juggling act at the right stage in the process. So as I say, for the growth strategy, I think we're moving to a point of having enough information to make that informed decision to go into the next phase of that, because we're conscious that it's, you know, it's starting to push out and push out and push out. And that's the last thing we want, is it just to go around in circles for a while. So everything's there. We just need this last little bit of flooding information to come through, and then we'll be back to council with a draft document, which I think is looking really good.
Thanks, Dan. Just as an aside, Horizons could find themselves in legal hot water, I would imagine, or could potentially find themselves in legal hot water if that floodplain that they've got is proved to be wrong. I'll give you an example. A person I know very well recently sold her house that she lived in for 65 years, never flooded, but it shows up on the floodplain as being in that floodplain. And they had an offer on the house. It went to the lawyer obviously checked or got someone to check the floodplain and advised the purchaser to get out of to drop the contract. She subsequently sold the house, but that could, I suggest, be a case where Horizons, if it's proved if it's proved to be wrong, where they could be held liable.
Yeah, look, I think, due diligence is a wonderful thing, and when it comes to buying properties, and what I would say is when we're talking things like flooding or land use classes and soil types, we're talking quite expansive areas of mapping, and it is very hard to have that accurate to the square meter. So a lot of that work is heavily disclaimed around, this is at this scale and the best information that we have. Look, I don't think it's detrimental. It's just a couple of older model versus a newer model that needs to be aligned and create one central point of information. So those two parties have prioritised that. They'll sort that out. I don't think it's going to throw up anything too inconsistent with what we think. Horizons have been very open with Pahiatua in the past to say that the modelling is very assumption based down there, just because it had never been sort of run as accurate as it could be. Obviously now we've got LiDAR that's been done for down there, so it's just an evolving of the information. And as I say, we're, like I said before, we're only as good as what we have, and in those sorts of situations, everybody is sort of pointed in a direction of, you might need to do site-specific assessments to really understand a risk or something in relation to a specific property. So, look, it's not a statement or conversation to raise alarm bells. It's more just to say that we want to make sure we refine the thinking before we go out to the public with a document. In that context. So I think if anything, it's a good thing, because we've probably created a stronger bond between us and Horizons in having refined flood information for our district moving forward, because I think there is has been a lot of uncertainty out there through the consenting world in that space. So it's a good thing. So that's the flooding side of things. On a more positive note, I think in the past we've talked to you about a piece of work we commissioned with a company called Burl. They're in the sort of property economics space, and their job is sort of to look at projections and unpack those and look at trends and that sort of thing. And as we've sort of talked about in the past, our sort of projected growth sort of didn't really indicate a huge amount for industrial growth in the district. There was a bit of a gap in the data, and certainly from my perspective, with the growth strategy, I've really been towing a strong line of wanting to capture two pictures in that strategy. One is the factual projections based, and two is the aspirational space. So there was pretty strong directive to Bill to capture that aspirational space for us, which they have done and has painted a really positive aspirational picture for the district moving forward. So I won't go into it in too much detail for today, just because it will come in the future when we bring the draft growth strategy back. But essentially what they've done is business as usual at the moment is based off 1.2% GDP growth. They've added an extra % on top of that. Similar with employment. I think employment growth is around 0.6 growth rate. They've gone 1.6. So it's really about going, okay, we acknowledge that the stats and the projections say one thing in terms of business as usual. And the projections or growth scenarios that council's adopted, and even at the high level, still projects quite a flatter line for us in terms of our growth moving forward over the next 30 years. So Burl have sort of taken that on board and run this aspirational scenario, which has increased the numbers. And what it's based off, and the commentary will come through in the growth strategy, is that we want to attract more people to work here. We want to attract more businesses to relocate here, and we want to attract more people to come and live here. And that's one thing that stats projections and those sort of things don't really capture to the fullest extent, because it is a little bit crystal ball. And as we've said in the past, and I think Shannon's been quite strong on, is that we can't just pluck random things out of the sky and go, hey, this is it. So we needed to do this work. It's come back and it's showing that if we put the aspirational thing in, that there is a need for additional land, and it is answering the question in Woodville around, hey, let's have additional land there or additional land in Dannyburg and that sort of thing, if we want to be aspirational. Now, that's obviously got to be precursored pretty heavily, because we can't grow everywhere and we can't grow phenomenally quickly, because with growth comes cost, and big cost is infrastructure, right? So we need to, you know, if we do open up new areas, we need to be confident that we can supply those areas for infrastructure as well. So piece of work that's underway at the moment with Hamish and his team and our team is to really understand what the growth looks like from an infrastructure perspective. And that is a really crucial part of the district plan work as we move forward to next year. So just sort of acknowledging the two different parts of what we're working on. Growth strategy, very aspirational, setting a direction. District plan is the devil in the detail, and where we actually have to justify what we want to do. So a lot happening behind the scenes at the moment. You know, the district plan, albeit in a pretty heavy consultation year, is still on track and moving forward on its pathway for next year. But as I say, at the moment, we're just really pushing to bring a draft strategy to you guys this side of Christmas, which sort of capped the year off. And on the note of strategy, again, I just echo comments before. Awesome to see the district strategy come through. I think it's something I've said a lot. We need that foundation document at the top for us to flow down. So now that's made our life a lot easier as well, because we can refer back up the strategy line. So congratulations on that.
Any questions for Dan or Amy? I think December's going to be exciting. Yeah. Item number 1 on our agenda down. Thanks for that update. I can appreciate, Dan, how frustrating it is while you're sitting waiting for, you know, I underlined all of the dates that were promised to you around some of this stuff. So it can be very frustrating when you're sitting there waiting. But I am pleased to hear that you are moving on, though, and you're right to propose that the growth strategy is much more high level than some of that detail that we certainly will require to make those decisions around. So appreciate you splitting that out. Councillor Steve.
Just a quick one through you, Chair Tracy, Chair Sharon.
That's the other one. There's nice, Ellie.
Obviously, in your work, obviously you also factor in the energy needs for these growth structures. So, you know, like yeah, exactly. So the forecast there is tracking right with the suppliers.
I think it's quite key that we had some conversations, and Shannon's been having some with Scampower, really favourable in terms of where we're heading in terms of our draft growth strategy. We're also touching base with PowerCo, and we've reached out to them. I think that's happening as well, because obviously there's capacity and capability, and we need to make sure that they are aligned and there's no hiccups.
Yeah, compliment. Yeah, because I know there is hiccups, and so that's good to hear. It's been addressed. Thank you.
Questions? Okay. Thank you, Amy and Dan. We know you're working behind the scenes as hard as you can, and just very excited to think what might be coming our way. So well done. Keep it moving. Right. Thank you. Thank you for your attendance. So let's move. Oh no, we better move the recommendation. I'm here. I've got it in me. I feel it coming across the table. So let's go back to the recommendation that we received. This report concerning proposed growth strategy. Oh, there we go. We've got Councillor Steve and Councillor Naoma. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Right, Malcolm, I'll invite you to the table. You might be there a wee while, but would mind coming up, and we'll move back to item 7.3, councillors. Who would you like to start, Malcolm?
Thank you, Chair Sharon. We start at the beginning, Sharon. Councillors, this is one of those legislative set tasks, processes that councils have to do from time to time. Section 17A refers to a piece of the Local Government Act. And councils have been doing this only for a short while in terms of history. It came into the Local Government Act 2014, something like that. So council's gone through this process fully once before, and this is the second round. It was introduced to the Local Government Act. The government of the day was trying to effectively force councils to set up business-like structures and almost privatise some parts of council services. It got watered down through the legislative process to a certain extent, and there's a number of ways to there's some practical clauses in the Act which allows you to not waste a whole heap of time doing stuff, to look at all your activities that actually you don't have much choice in terms of doing. And so in terms of going through the council activities, we've gone through a number of iterations in this year, just with all the things that have been changing and facing local government in terms of legislative change and so forth, Three Waters. There's some key parts of the Section 17A legislation that basically says you have to review your activities if you're about to renew a large contract, effectively, unless you have no choice. And so there's also, you're required to review your activities unless there's a clause that basically allows you to say, well, we're actually legally required to do this, say like governance. I mean, you can review it all you like, but you've actually got no choice in terms of largely the way that you do it. You can't contract out councillors, as much as some of you might occasionally wish that would be possible. But anyway, so there's a number of things like that. And in other ones where there's no practical alternatives, you also don't have to go through a full expensive study to work out what's the best way of delivering that activity. An example of that would be libraries, where there is effectively no private sector company that delivers that service. In fact, there's no council in the country that actually sets it up in a different way apart from a core council service. So you are required, though, for those activities that you don't have a exclusion possibility for, you are required to go through a process and think about, could this be better done as a shared service? Could we collaborate with other councils? Could we collaborate or do a partnership with private sector? Could it be contracted out? Or alternatively, if it is contracted out, could we actually deliver it cheaper by bringing it back in-house? And so the idea is that this forms a little bit of a process and a rigor around looking at these things from time to time, rather than just being stuck in, this is the way we've always done it, so this is the way we'll always do it. And often there are things to discuss. I mean, back in 2000, and the one that triggered a large review last time in the council around parks and reserves, when the contracts for mowing and maintenance were put out to the market as the contract time was up. We spent quite a bit of time in the council looking at whether we could deliver that service in-house, employ all your own mowers and buy the trucks and do all that. And in the end, that came out, we thought, as being, financially not a whole lot different, but it was cheaper to keep contracting. And then there was a whole heap of risk that council would take on board by bringing it in-house. So the decision was made to go to market and contract it out again. Pluses and minuses and all these things. So we've gone through all the activities of council and gone through a bit of a process in terms of where they're at, what's the legislation around it, what's the likely benefits of doing a full study, because it is actually, when you go into doing a full review, it actually takes quite a bit of time for each activity. There's quite a bit of internal staff time. Some of the bigger ones, other councils have spent $50,000 doing a Section 7A review for roading because it's such a big contract. And if you were doing it in a different way or collaborating, then you're talking about, some significant sums of money, and you need to get it right. This council, this time round, you've got your contract with Downer for the Alliance. And so, you're not in a position to get out of that contract unless you had a very good reason to do so. And so that Section 17A process would happen the next time that contract comes up for renewal, which is not now. The Three Waters, with all the changes going along, the decision, the recommendation from us, from the staff, is that there's so much going on with the restructuring and legislation, and that it would be pointless to do a study right now. Next year, who knows? We'll see how that comes along. And then we went down through all the other activities, and the net result was that either from stuff that's been done in recent past, or no practical alternatives, or we didn't think, a lot of your activities are quite small, and so it didn't seem to be worth spending a whole heap of time at the moment looking at some of those things. We came down to only being a few that we thought warranted going into a full 17A review. There's camping grounds and swimming pools, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. Risks to council, contracts that aren't working so well, or opportunities for change. But within those, it's just like right now, as you're well aware, it's a really busy time for council, and particularly the community facilities group of council has had a whole lot of staff changes going on. It's a difficult time to actually do that sort of proper study. And so we're recommending that those two proceed next year. Need to do them. Other ones, like I said, like libraries, we didn't think there was any practical alternatives. There is potentially, should say, it's a bit like bylaws. There's a 6-year legal requirement to review every activity, and then those exclusions come up. It doesn't mean that you can't do it at any stage. It's not like once you, if you accept all the recommendations in this report, it doesn't mean that you can't next year actually cite, actually, we'd like to do that sort of process for an activity because this opportunities come up. And that might be collaboration with other council, might be a shared service, could be a new private sector company that comes in that wasn't here before and offers you an amazing deal to do something. So yeah, it's quite a process though, because once you get into a change, then other processes then can kick in. So it might become an LTP issue because it might be significant to the community. And so then you've got to, as well as doing the study, then you'd have to consult before any changes were made. And of course, any of these things impact existing staff in the council. So you have to be sensitive and quite careful about how these things are signalled.
Thank you, Malcolm. I certainly appreciate the context that you've included within your report. Particularly appreciate 7.4. The table was well and truly very explanatory around what we don't need to worry about and what we do need to worry about. I do have some questions, but I'll just open it up to the floor before I ask mine. Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Chair Sharon, and through you to Malcolm. Thanks for the report. Really, really good report, Malcolm. Just I guess a general question. I don't disagree with I guess the recommendations here. Really thinking through our LTP process and really some of the, the thoughts that I've had, particularly with community members, of us having to look at doing things differently and doing some of these things differently, that perhaps a full Section 17A report isn't required on this list. I just want to double check that, particularly shared services really jumps out at me. I think councils across the country are going to be in a really similar situation when we're looking at rates and rate requirements and looking to try and find ways to be able to create some efficiency. So I just want to quickly double check that if we don't do a Section 17A report, a full Section 17A, that we still can investigate things like shared services and other things in isolation, or just changing the way that we do activity. So I just want to make sure that's the case.
Yeah, Councillor Scott, you definitely can. But often it's just that when we do a review like that, often we use the sort of Section 17A sort of structure in terms of making sure that we address those sort of issues when you're looking at options and alternatives. Just in case there has been a couple of cases where there's been some major changes in council activities. There's only been a couple of legal cases, and a lobby group used the 17A sort of clause to say, well, you didn't go through that process. And the judge said, as long as you sort of took the concepts rather than the identical structure sort of thing. So there's been very limited legal case law on this, and audit seems to be particularly disinterested in it, which is interesting. It's one of those ones that there's some councils just do a very cursory sort of report that says we've looked at everything and it's fine, and no one seems to care. And other councils do like really rigorous analysis through it, and I guess that reflects just the direction of the day. But yeah, it's interesting. This is one that has sort of some legal things sort of don't really come on the radar and others do, but it just is a prudent thing. You just include the concepts. Have we thought about shared services? Have we thought about, contracting out? And I've done a few reviews like that for other councils, like for swimming pools, where you've actually you haven't done it in a strictly rigorous way, but you've actually included those concepts, and you can say, in a few years, oh yes, we've taken into account the 17A concept. But yeah, and look, there's a few, and I know coming up in a future LTP workshop where we're going to talk about solid waste in terms of the LTP. We'll be flagging the possibility of a 17A type process in the near future to go through a whole lot of stuff as the legislation changes, and in terms of the way that you do things and that. But yeah.
You have a supplementary, then I'll come to you, Mike.
Thanks, Chair Sharon. Just a very, very quick follow-up, and thanks through you, Chair Sharon. Thank you very much for explaining it, because I think that we haven't had some tough conversations as of yet, and I think that I want to just be really, really clear that although I absolutely support the recommendation here, that I don't want to be taking any of those other conversations off the table. So I appreciate you clarifying that.
Through you, Chair Sharon, aren't we bringing solid waste in-house now? Is that correct, Bill?
Yeah, so one of the things, when you're doing things at the margin, like, are we changing level of service? No. Are we changing anything in a significant way from a customer, from the ratepayer and the resident point of view? No. And so there's a different bar in terms of doing that. And often councils, you make changes in the short term that are relatively minor from the operational point of view. And that tends to be fine. But when you're dealing with, if we were saying we would set up a shared service with Marsden District or Central Hawke's Bay around where the recycling goes or where the refuse system operated, and that, you'd be like, well, hang on a sec, that's a bit bigger. And you'd need to actually go through some sort of review process to justify that sort of change, because it then starts, you then start looking at your significance and engagement policy and saying, is this significant for residents? And it's like, And as soon as you start going, you think, okay, we better just hold off here and just think about process. Yeah.
Tracy.
Sharon, just in regards to, we've obviously got a roading contract for 10 years. We'll be about year 5 in that. At what stage would you start planning for that section 17A? Because that's a really big piece of work, and I know how much pressure we've got on now. Is that in the plan, and how long, what sort of period do you look at?
The legislation says that if it's within 2 years, and so you do it. If you did it with 3 years to go, technically you'd have to do it again. So you know, there's some timing thresholds in there. I mean, as you know, the law is occasionally really stupid, but you know, you operate within it, obviously. So yeah, with 2 years to go in that contract, you would need to plan to do quite a major piece of work around, you know, performance, cost, options. That would then go into part of the tender process or whatever. And you need to do it before you go to tender, because you need to know what you're wanting and what you're aiming for. Yeah.
Thanks, Malcolm. Before I go to other councillors, one of the questions I have for you, and it's around the context I shared around the bylaws and policy discussion, is the implications of us not doing the timing and or a significant review of one of the items you've alluded to here in particular means that some of our decision making for the LTP might be stymied. And you know, and I'm happy to talk to your recommendation here about 1.2, is that I'm concerned that if we can't do it, the implications for an LTP decision around, for instance, how we might be looking after our swimming pools across the district, which we've debated around the table in many ways. If we don't do it, you know, I mean, the implications for an LTP might be, well, because we need to do a whole review of it. Any decisions we make about swimming pools, we might be deferring for year after year. And I guess it comes to that priority. I appreciate, you know, the workload of the staff, but at some stage we have to list what we've really got to do no matter what and what might fall off.
I mean, that's a very good point, Chair Sharon. But I think as in the LTP, it's more critical to get the sort of the budget envelope right. And often, because when we do a review, and then if you concluded that you do it in a different way, say you bought it all in-house, then that would be then consulted on as part of the annual plan, the next year's annual plan. And then there's a discussion with the auditors that happens with Raj in terms of, is this significant in terms of the overall council, you know, operation? Because you only need to amend the LTP if it's of material significance. So yeah, so if the budgets don't change much, but the way you do it does, then often you can do that as an annual plan process.
You get in there.
That's not worry.
I think it's an important question that you ask, because it doesn't just apply to swimming pools, it also applies to slopways, park concepts. So the LTP, why we tend to say the LTP is the right time to make those changes, because you're making those changes in the 10-year plan, and you're putting the what you call the rates requirement in the LTP. So that's why you start on that. However, like Malcolm said, there's also an ability for us in the annual plan to do so, to reduce the impact of doing what we call an amendment to the LTP or significant consultation. In the LTP itself, you could signal it. If you recall, when we did the forestry rates, we said in the LTP that we will introduce it. So I think it's very important that things like this that we want to change, is to have a discussion in the LTP and signal our intent. That's what we will do. That means comes the annual plan, it's not a change in service levels. You already said that you're going to do it. Now you're just giving effect to this. And then the output would be, okay, what's the impact on the ratepayers? The output is quite minimal in terms of rates impact. Level of service, with this signal, we're going to change it. So you may not have to do a full LTP consultation, or you don't have to do what you call from an audit point of view, an amendment to it. You have articulated that well enough. So I think that's what we need to do. If we cannot through prioritization, or we cannot because we are waiting for things to happen before we can fully discuss that element, then I think we need to signal in the LTP our intention to do that. So that will flow through active management plans, and then it'll be mentioned in the LTP. You may say, okay, we're going to do a bit of a study or work here in year one. Then you may have actually mentioned that or resource it. So I think that needs to happen. If let's say we're not doing it as of 1st July, if we intend to do this, and I think there is clear indication of council that you want to revisit some of the service and how we deliver it, we need to mention that in the LTP.
It just reinforces for me that there are some mechanisms, because as Councillor Scott said, we don't want to lose any of these topics off the table. Yeah.
Sorry. Hamish and I chat about this one. It was solid waste. You know, it's an activity, and we are going through a process of renewing the contract. We're going to renew it, and Councillor Long, you're right. We're changing how we are delivering it, not impacting service levels, but how we're delivering it. But there's a desire now to revisit that activity. We're waiting for WMMP to be done. That will inform. And I think we also want to do a 17A review for that activity once we have the contract signed, WMMP done, so that we can look at the activity in a new light, look at the waste streams. I think that's what Hamish wants to do. So there may be an intention for us to say, signal in this LTP, our desire to revisit this. There will be a work program in year one to settle WMMP, settle the contracts, to revisit how we're managing waste.
Any other questions for Malcolm? This paper? Well, it's a very comprehensive paper and outlines it very well. Thank you, Malcolm.
I should just say, Chair Sharon, just that I would fully expect after the dust settles on the new government and whatever happens with Three Waters is that I would not be surprised to see some significant multi-council 17A type review collaboration that would be discussed next year somehow, somewhere.
So how do you want these recommendations put? There's a group, Ellie? Okay. So we reflect on 1.1 that we're receiving the report, that at this stage, this report outlines what doesn't need to be done. There are some activities that will require it, and obviously that's a discussion point as we move through the LTP process, and that we approve that these reviews with knowledge of workload and the process that we're following anyway, that those two reviews are deferred for a year. Into the 24-25. Remove that, please. Councillor Long and Councillor Franklin seconded. All those in favour? Aye. Thank you, Malcolm. Right.
And thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Angela, putting all this together. Okay, I would like to, unless there's any other discussion to be had, I would like to formally close the meeting.
Can I just make a comment, thanks? Closing comment, just nothing specific, but I had it on my mind earlier on, but it was just when the Dale was commenting on the growth strategy, Mayor Tracy brought up the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs. So something's been on my mind about communication. So this committee and ISIM committee usually don't have the press there, and Mayor Tracy and ourselves have used the press in the main meeting to be quite helpful for releases of decision making. So just take the two today, which is growth strategy approved and Mayor's Task Force Jobs, if that pops in here. I think I think myself, for our purposes, it's just need to think about what's a good way to make sure some of the decisions here or the things of interest get to the press, perhaps. Castle's not here at the moment, I don't think. And just a thought I had. While they're not here, we do lose one of our unofficial methods of communications over, and some of the decisions we've made in this committee are pretty important. If the Mayor's Task Force job one stays here as well. There are some that are made in ISOM committee that are quite important with roading and the dam, for example. But we usually get a few people at that meeting. So just a comment, no bright idea about it, and maybe Mayor Tracy and yourselves are thinking that, or Adele is, but just communication, important decisions, and maybe important discussions, perhaps. So,
Just quickly, for example, my last committee meeting here, the press couldn't be here, but they reviewed it online and listened to the recording, and that's how they were able to put so much in the paper, even though they weren't here. So I'm pretty sure that Leanne will probably be fairly on to it as long as she's aware that the meetings are had. Yeah. So that's what she's been doing, is listening to the recording, so I make that clarification.
Timestamps. Absolutely fine.
I think the district strategy is something to be celebrated. So, I mean, I'd hope that we would be sharing that, through our own channels and celebrating that, and especially to councillors as they go out to their community groups and organisations, sharing that strategy. Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, there wasn't any decisions made here today, but actually the communication for that is slightly different because of the MSD funding and component of it. So sometimes that goes through both the Mayor and Wellington, but I think it is really good to have those, have them reported. And I do hope that the reporters are watching, because when they don't attend these committee meetings, they miss out on some really critical conversations, that aren't covered in the council meetings. So I do hope.
Ask you, Dale, through gas station.
In the council page, around the district strategy. Right, thank you everyone for your attendance. I'll formally close this committee meeting with just a little quote. I may not be there yet, but I'm closer than I was yesterday. Yes. No, I'm referring to the fact we're moving on. Well done, team. Thank you very much. We'll cease recording. And